Hey, how you doing? Nick Digilio here. How are you? Hey, I like to do some videos and review some movies and talk some cool stuff and tell some stories. There's a bunch of videos here on my YouTube channel. Scroll down. There's like, I don't know, almost 200 of them. I usually do one or two a week now. I've been doing a lot of work on the podcast and some other stuff, and now appearing on WLS. So I don't do the videos as much as I used to, but I still do them. I still do them for free, and I still hope that you could donate to my Patreon page at patreon.com/NickDShow. Maybe you're watching this on Patreon. Here's the deal. Help me out. I do the videos. I do some other stuff. I appear on WLS, and I have a podcast called the Nick D Podcast. And if you'd like to help out, all this stuff I'm doing for free. If you'd like to help out, you can. And I would love that for me. So you can go to patreon.com/NickDShow, patreon.com/NickDShow, and donate today. And also, I will be doing a live version of my podcast, the Nick D Podcast, live at Zany's Comedy Club in Rosemont, Illinois. It'll be on Tuesday night, November 15th. My partner, Esmeralda Leon, and I will be on stage. We're going to do a recording of the podcast live at Zany's. We want to pack the place, so get your tickets now. You can check out Zany's.com, rosemont.zanys.com for tickets. They're on sale right now. We're going to be giving away prizes. We're going to have special surprise guests. We're going to be telling some great stories, some stuff that we've talked about in the past on the podcast. And you're going to be there, and there's going to be audience interactive stuff going on. So you will be a part of the live podcast and the recording, which will be dropped on every single platform across the universe the next day. So you will be part of a live podcast recording. So be in the crowd. Pack the place. Zany's in Rosemont, Tuesday, November 15th. We want to pack the house. If we do really well, we'll continue to do these things on a regular basis, get more surprise guests, more prizes for you. So there's going to be prizes there to give away and all kinds of fun stuff. Esmeralda and I on stage, having a great time like we always do on my podcast, on the Nick D Podcast, radiomisfits.com is where we are, and on every platform. And you should come out Tuesday, November 15th at the Zany's Comedy Club in Rosemont, Illinois. Incredibly easy to get to. Tickets are on sale right now, so go to rosemont.zanys.com or check it out on my page and all that kind of stuff. But it's at Zany's in Rosemont, the Nick D Podcast live with me and Esmeralda on stage and you in the audience and prizes given away. It's going to be a blast. Tuesday, November 15th, Zany's in Rosemont. Get your tickets right now. Get them now. And also, donate at Patreon. I'd really appreciate it. Patreon.com/NickDShow. Speaking of Rosemont, I was there last night with one of my best friends, one of my oldest friends. My friend Scott Oaken and I went to the AMC Dine-In 18 Rosemont Theater. I've known Scott Oaken for, Jesus Christ, 40 years almost. It'll be in a couple, it's 38 years I've known him. About 38 years. Scott's birthday was last night. And we met at the Rosemont Theater there, the AMC Rosemont Theater, to see the new documentary about Ronnie James Dio. Now, I happen to love Dio. I love him. I've always loved him. Been a big fan. When I first met Scott, Scott wasn't way into the metal or the hard stuff or any of that kind of stuff. And he somehow, and I'll take full credit for it, but he traces it back to me turning him on to Dio. Like, he would not have gotten into Sabbath, he would not gotten into Dio, Rainbow, or any of that heavy metal stuff, or the hardcore hard rock stuff without me. The story goes that we went into Rolling Stone, which is a great record store that's still open near the Harlem Irving Plaza, over there on Irving, just west of Harlem. And we would go there on a regular basis. One of the first times I ever met Scott, we went in, and I walked up to a record bin, and I pulled out, his story is I pulled out Heaven and Hell by Sabbath, and I said, you need to buy this. And I pulled out Last in Line by Dio, and I said, you need to buy this. And Scott, guitar player his whole life, but was really only into like the 60s pop and way into the Beatles at that point, and he's still the biggest Beatles fan I know. But at that point, Scott was into the British Invasion stuff, the poppy stuff. He had a lot of 45s, and way deeply into the Beatles, but he never went harder than that. And as kind of a joke, I went, hey, man, you need to buy this. And I pulled out Heaven and Hell, and I pulled out Last in Line by Dio. Like, you need to buy these right now. And they were in the bargain bin. There was like a $3 bin in the front. And he bought them, and he fucking loved them, and then he dove deep into the deep end of heavy metal, got harder than I've ever gotten, and became one of the biggest Dio, Sabbath fans ever. Sabbath, obviously, Ozzy, every incarnation of Sabbath. But he bought Heaven and Hell and Last in Line at my insistence and became a huge Dio fan. So I thought it appropriate that Scott and I see the new Dio documentary, Dreamers Never Die, which is all about the life of Ronnie James Dio, the career, everything. And I thought, okay, this is going to be great. And I got the tickets, and I totally forgot that it was Scott's birthday. So not only did we see each other and hang out, which was really cool. We don't see each other as much as we used to when we were younger. And not only was it us seeing a Dio documentary together, which is a very connecting thing for Scott and I. We bonded over Dio when we first met almost 40 years ago. Not only do I feel responsible for turning him into the metalhead Dio fanatic that he now is and has been for years, but it was his birthday. So we hung out on his birthday and saw a Dio documentary, and it was great. Now, I don't know if that affected how much I love the movie, but I fucking loved the movie. And if you are a Ronnie James Dio fan, it is called Dio, Dreamers Never Die. It only played last night, the 28th of September, and it's going to play this Sunday, October 2nd, in theaters, and then it's going to video on demand or streaming or something like that. If you can see it on the big screen with the sound, really loud sound and everything, do it. We saw it at the Rosemont Theater last night, the Rosemont AMC. Really filled house, total fucking Dio fanatics. The sound was loud. It was awesome. And we laughed, and we cried, and we watched all this incredible footage. If you are a Ronnie James Dio fan, if you like Dio, and you should, this movie is a gift. It is like a gift from the heavens. It is an incredibly great documentary about Dio, who deserved a documentary, who, for so many years, and it's covered in the movie, was completely sort of dismissed by pretentious music snobs. And the genre of heavy metal is often kind of disregarded. And that's all covered in the movie, about how heavy metal has always been considered shit, about how Dio never got the respect that he deserved as not only an incredible vocalist, fucking incredible vocalist, but a great songwriter and an innovator and a guy who wrote great music. This stuff has never really been addressed before. This is Ronnie James Dio is part of the bastard child of music, which is heavy metal, and he's always been kind of the heavy metal god, but in kind of a joking way. But no, seriously, this guy was an incredible vocalist, a great songwriter, an incredible innovator, and a really, really important artist in the history of music. Not just metal, but music. And the movie talks about that. And it felt great to be in a theater full of people who felt the same way. So if you can get a chance to see it on Sunday, October 2nd at movie theaters across the country, do it. Get your ass out there and see it. If you can't, when it comes on VOD, when it streams, you need to watch it. If you're not a heavy metal fan, but you're just a fan of music, you should see it. If you're just a fan of good music documentaries, and goddamn, has 2022 been a great year for music documentaries. With the Bowie documentary and the Courtney Barnett documentary and the upcoming Tanya Tucker documentary. There have been great music documentaries this year, and this one, Dio Dreamers Never Die, is right near the top. So the directors of the movie, the guys are Damien Fenton and Don Argot. Damien Fenton made a documentary about the metal band Pentagram, and then Don Argot is a guy who's made a bunch of really incredible documentaries that come all over the place. He was also one of the guys who directed, one of the directors and creators of the series Slugfest, which was a TV series, a streaming series, documentary series about the DC universe versus the Marvel universe. Terrific stuff. He made a documentary about Kurt Vonnegut. He made a documentary about John DeLorean. He made a documentary about Election Day 2016 and how everybody was completely blown away by the awful thing that happened on November 8th, 2016. He made a movie called Believer, which is about the lead singer of Imagine Dragons and him being a Mormon. He also made, going back to, 16, 17 years ago, he made a great film called Rock School, which was about the real-life school of rock. So this guy's a great documentary filmmaker. So along with Damien, they've made this movie together. And it's a great documentary. It is a thorough documentary. It covers Ronnie James Dio's entire life, all the way back from when he grew up in upstate New York, from his first adventures in music to how he started out as a trumpet player. And then he became sort of like a Bobby Vinton kind of, early 60s, late 50s greaser, beautiful short-haired guy, Engelbert Humperdinck, Tom Jones, kind of a crooner. He was in a band called Ronnie and the Red Caps, and he started out playing trumpet. He played trumpet on those songs. They had some minor hit 45s, which you get to see somebody playing on their turntable. And it goes all the way back to that, to when there was a horrible car accident that almost killed him and did kill one of the members of his band, the Red Caps, that changed his life, where he reevaluated his life. He went through a windshield, split his head open, he almost died. And after that, that life-changing event, he started to decide, he started to get more socially conscious. This started, in the late 60s. He went from sort of like the pop Frankie Avalon kind of singer, which, if you can imagine, and beautifully done, trumpet player, in kind of a wedding kind of band, to going electric. And they started this band, these guys who were in the Red Caps with him, they started this band in the late 60s called the Electric Elves. And they had a modicum of success, and then they became Elf. And that's when I first heard of Dio. Now, actually, the first time I heard of Dio was with Rainbow. And then when I loved the Rainbow records that he was on, the first Rainbow album I heard that he was on, I went back and I got the first Elf record. And Elf is fantastic, very similar. So he steps out. The movie is about him stepping out when he's with Elf to become a frontman, and to become a heavy metal frontman, to become a hard rock frontman, and really work that voice. He'd never been a singer, and he thought, well, you know what? I use the same tools to play the trumpet as I do to sing, and he became one of the greatest and most iconic voices in hard rock heavy metal history. And the movie is about that. It's about his years with Elf. It's about his years with Rainbow, and then taking over for Ozzy when Ozzy left Black Sabbath, and what a big fucking deal that was, and how insane that was for him to take over for Ozzy and Black Sabbath, and how he not only made it his own, but some people like the Dio stuff more than the Ozzy stuff, or it's just as good. Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, those two albums, unbelievable records. There's an unbelievable scene where they have some reenactments in it of people listening to Dio, actors playing characters, and there's an unbelievable scene where this couple who are blowing weed in a basement, they bought Heaven and Hell on vinyl, and they're about to listen to it, and they're like, man, this is gonna suck. Who is this Dio guy? Why is he there? Ozzy's gone. You can't have Sabbath without Ozzy. And then they put the record on, they drop the needle, they hear Heaven and Hell, and they go nuts. Like everybody who ever heard Heaven and Hell for the first time did. Those shoes, those Ozzy shoes, were massive to fill. Dio not only filled them, but he filled them great. So anyway, there's that. And so it covers that time with Sabbath, and then the Sabbath thing didn't work out. Then he went solo, put his own band together with Vivian Campbell and Vinny Appice and all these other guys. And then it covers his whole solo tour, how it took off. 80s metal, it talks about the height of 80s metal. It talks about how he is responsible because none of the metal guys were invited to Live Aid, the We Are the World thing that Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson put together. Nobody invited any of the metal guys. So, Dio was like, well, fuck, we want to help. We in the heavy metal community, and this was the mid-80s when hair metal and heavy metal and MTV were at its height. And so he's like, well, fuck it. So he wrote a song called We're Stars, put together Hearing Aid, and all the metal guys got together and sold millions of records and raised millions of dollars for, the starvation in Africa, for the USA for Africa thing, even though they were, again, like most heavy metal acts, blindsided and said, fuck you, you can't be a part of this, metal is ridiculous. So Dio put the song together, he produced it, he gathered all the big heavy metal icons from that era, put them together, and Hearing Aid, We're Stars, which is a goddamn jam, made a ton of money for that charity. And it's about that, about how he was a spokesman and a proponent for heavy metal music, how he was an artist, how he had visions, how he talked about dreams, and that was what his music was about. There was a lot of fantasy elements where he's on stage slaying dragons. There's a lot of there are stars and there are planets and blah blah blah. You're on rainbows and there's all kinds of sort of magical, mystical, crazy shit, medieval kind of sorcery. But it was all about dreaming and not letting that dream die. And that was what Dio's music was about. That's why the movie's called Dreamers Never Die. And it covers all of that. It covers when grunge came in and knocked heavy metal and hair metal and all kinds of rock out. And then it's about how his career went down for a long time, where he was playing small rooms. He went from giant stadiums to small clubs again. And then it built back up, and how he reunited with the guys in Black Sabbath, and they formed Heaven and Hell, and they did a tour on that. And then it's about his death. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer in 2008 or 9. Was sick for a while. Toured with Heaven and Hell with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and all the other guys. Had a very successful run. Was planning on doing another album, and he died. And he died at 61 in 2010, May 16th, 2010, in fact. And it killed me when I heard that Ronnie died. When I heard Dio died, it was incredible. I was working at the car wash, WGN at the time. I did a full 2-hour tribute to Ronnie James Dio on WGN. Yes, AM WGM, talk station, at that time Cub station. I did 2 hours that night, a tribute to Dio. Phone lines were lit up. I was playing music. One of my favorite things I've ever done in the history of my broadcast career was my 2-hour tribute to Ronnie James Dio on the night he died. And I will say this: I've got, I had a plaque in the sidewalk, the Walk of Fame at WGN. I've had some accolades and awards and stuff like that. But one of my favorite moments ever was that I spent 2 hours on WGN in Chicago talking about Ronnie James Dio playing his music on the night he died. It was great. And it is an amazing documentary. It covers all of that. It covers his personal life. Tons of photos that you've never seen before. Footage that has never been seen before. Home movies. If you want to see Dio barbecuing hot dogs, you can see it in this movie. If you want to see him wearing a crown at medieval times with his wife, you can see that. It talks about his relationship with his wife, who is one of the major stars in it, recalling stories. And, I mean, the who's who of people involved in it. You've got Vinny Appice, Sebastian Bach, who's very entertaining in it, Geezer Butler, Lita Ford, who's also hilarious, Rob Halford, God bless him, Eddie Trunk, a legendary radio TV personality who is a great proponent for heavy metal music, Bill Ward, his old bandmates from the Red Caps and from Elf are in this, old engineers and producers who play old recordings of his stuff, his takes, and incredible stories by Jack Black, who have obviously massive Dio fan. Tenacious D would not exist without Dio. He talks about, the Dio being in the movie Tenacious D, Pick of Destiny. He tells an amazing story about how when he came in to record the song for Pick of Destiny, Dio's vocals blew through 3 modern microphones. And Dio tells a story about how Dio's like, yeah, I brought my old mic. That's why I bring it, because I kind of blast through new mics. Tells that story. Incredible stories from everybody in the world of heavy metal, in the world of music. The footage is amazing. It is thorough. It is thought-provoking. It is incredibly entertaining. Really hilarious at times. Wonderful. It took me back to the days. Scott and I were like, it was like we were back, 35 years ago, hanging out in the 80s, listening to this stuff. Great footage. Great archival stuff. It is a great tribute to a great artist, to an underrated, woefully underrated and underappreciated, important music artist. And they do it justice. And if you're going on Sunday and the theatrical showings, if you stick around after the whole end credits, there are 4 or 5 extra scenes that they were cut from the movie that they show. One of them involves Jack Black telling a story about how Dave Grohl had an incident with Ronnie James Dio on the street years and years ago. One of them about how a garden gnome almost killed Ronnie James Dio. So these are just some of the stories that are after the credits. And in the movie itself, proper, tons of amazing stories told by great people. So in other words, it is a phenomenal, great music documentary that belongs on the list of incredible music documentaries that have come out this year. And if you're a fan of Ronnie James Dio, finally, there's about 2 hours and 15 minutes in this world that are dedicated to shining a light on a guy who has deserved it forever. I also want to mention that Don Coscarelli, writer, director, creator of the Phantasm series, he directed the video for The Last in Line. My friend Don Coscarelli, who now I can call a friend, he's in it, and they interview him about the making of Last in Line, the video, about how he was given a note that just said, kids in hell, teenagers in hell. And then he talks about the making of it and what happened and how Dio was involved in it. And when Last in Line, the video came out, this was like right when MTV completely blew up in the mid-'80s and early 80s. And Don Coscarelli from Phantasm, writer-director, the director of the Last in Line video, tells this amazing story about the making of that classic 80s metal video. So in addition to that story, there are tons of other stories, and I mentioned all the incredible artists and people that share their memories, incredible footage, everything. It is a great movie. Scott and I had a fantastic time. Scott said I couldn't think of a better way to spend my birthday. And it was a nice bonding moment for two guys who almost 40 years ago bonded over my insistence that Scott buy a couple of Ronnie James Dio records at Rolling Stones. So it was a great bonding moment for me and one of my best friends. That was great. But on the simplest of levels, it's a great movie. It's a terrific documentary made by guys who have made terrific documentaries in the past. And it is a tribute to a true icon, a fucking rock icon, a metal god, the man who invented this. And that's all explained. This whole thing is explained, where he got it, where it came from. I knew the story, but it's a great story. It involves his grandmother. And so from this to the music, to the stories, to everything in this movie, Dio, Dreamers Never Die. It's also made me cry. It's inspiring. And the message that Dio had, even in this crazy fucking heavy metal world, the message that he had was always positive, it was always lovely, and it was always about dreaming, achieving those dreams, and not being afraid to fantasize, to dream, even if it's ridiculous. A great movie, an inspiring movie about a great rock artist. So, Dio, Dreamers Never Die. One more time on the big screen across the country on October 2nd, Sunday, October 2nd. If you're watching this after October 2nd, it'll be streaming, it'll be on VOD. Dio, Dreamers Never Die. If you're a Dio fan, you probably already know about it, but if you didn't know about it, get your ass on there and watch it. If you're not a Dio fan, but you just like music, you need to watch it too. A great movie, and I'm unbelievably thrilled to have seen it. So, anyway, Dio, Dreamers Never Die. Yeah, we rock!